Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to an interview session that's been arranged in connection with the Troop 21 and Troop 52, as well as the Post 21 and Post 52 reunion. This is Saturday, June 18th, and we're at the First United Methodist Church in downtown Fort Worth, and we have with us several members from the 1980s of both Post 52 and also Troop 52. And we're going to operate this with little interviews and snippets to see what they have to say, and hopefully can tell us a little bit about their era and get it recorded on tape. My name is Rob Moran, and I grew up as a member of Post 52, starting in 1977. Actually the winter of '76, and have been involved with it ever since. I know most of these people, but not all of them. But anyway, let's get started. I'd like to begin by having everybody introduce themselves, and I'll start with our youngest member, which is to my immediate right. If you'd please introduce yourself and tell us your involvement with the troop or the post.
Sure. My name is Charles McAdams. I was in the troop in 1986 through 1993, and I was a senior patrol leader, I think in '92 for 6, maybe 9 months under Jack Boyd and Larry Ivy. I guess the first time I started was in 1986, and I went to Worth Ranch with Jack. He took just a couple of us.
Okay, we'll come back and visit with you in just a little bit more about the troop. Let's go to the next one, Ben.
Sure, I'm Ben Fortner. I started with the Post, I believe, about 1988, 89, and began through the 90s. Did a lot of things with the Post, the ski trips, the strength trip, tree lot, and was president for a little while. A lot of good memories, and it was great being back in the Post room the other day and seeing that all again, and everybody really enjoyed it.
Okay, Steve.
I'm Steve Holloman. I was active in the Post from, I believe it was the winter of '85 up until I suppose it was the early '90s, '93, '94, somewhere in that range, and I ended up serving all the different offices within the Post, and kind of started becoming a little bit more inactive after I was lodge chief in '89, '90, and anyway, recently moved back to Texas about 5 years ago, and have gotten back involved with the Post on sort of an associate advisor type level with some of the guys. So it's good to be back and good to see everybody.
All right, Alan.
Alan Thompson, as the oldest person, at least in this panel, the second to our moderator, I can claim a fuzzy memory as the reason that I am unable to recall which year I joined the Post, but according to my resident historian, Mark McBride, it was probably around 1982 or 83, and I suppose it was Mark who was also a scout with me over in Arlington, although we were in separate troops, who recruited me to the Post. Probably, I guess I would guess through our high school association. Mark was, though, a year ahead of me in high school, and probably became active in the Post right around Christmas time. So tree lot time, and the ski trip always seemed to be a very good recruiting opportunity to attract new members to the Post. So I remember working maybe 1 or 2 hours at the tree lot.
It's not what the record showed.
Yeah, and then going home and asking my parents for the money so that I. Right, yeah, and then serving in various capacities in Post leadership later on in the years up through probably the early 1990s, having worked at Worth Ranch and Sid Richardson, until we kind of all hit that magic 21 age, and many of us moved off to college, but have in some form or fashion hopefully stayed involved or in contact with people from the unit.
Okay. While you have the microphone, let's go ahead and why don't you tell us what you're doing today in your life?
Well, I credit so many people in the Post for any measure of personal or professional success I might have.
Why is that?
Well, I remember my first year at aquatic school as a camper, and I was extremely young. I must say maybe 12 years old, and it would have been
aquatic school.
Yeah, and it would have been very difficult, I think, back then, given the physical demands of that week.
I think it was after you that we no longer let 12-year-olds come.
Probably. But I hear people laughing in the background. That's not very reassuring for my ego. Thank you. But I remember having a very tough week, and around the middle of the week, being extremely homesick and wanting to go home. And one particular staff member was very understanding and explained to me that, well, you've only got a couple of days left, stick it out. And that taught me a valuable lesson about perseverance, and so that lesson, along with others too numerous to mention, taught me just that that things that are worth having don't come easily. In the years that have passed, I've earned a PhD and am an associate professor of criminal justice at Southern Miss, and next year I'll be moving to Old Dominion University.
Okay. Well, great. Well, I know it's about your nap time, so we'll move on to someone else. McAdams, let's talk about the troop just a little bit for the time period that you were involved. What did the troop do for, like, summer camp or summer activities during the period that you were there?
Well, we always went to Worth Ranch for the summer, for a week. And we typically went to Arkansas or Colorado, and did just maybe a 10-day trip out in the woods. You guys know how it was. Maybe every other year we'd go to Philmont, and that was, I guess, the typical summer camp. And we'd go every month during the school year.
Okay. One of the things that's always talked about with the troop is how it developed boy leadership. And can you comment, since you're a former senior patrol leader for the troop, what sort of lessons you learned from the troop and how it accomplished it in terms of leadership?
Wow, that's a big question. Definitely, there was a lot of responsibility for the boys to lead. To put it in terms that we use in the workplace now, they put the responsibility at the lowest level that was available, I guess. And I'm not sure how to develop that question
Okay.
right now.
Well, how has your experience with the troop affected how you live your life today?
I'd say significantly. Just it's a place where I had to be responsible. I was in charge of how things went as a patrol leader, and on the staff and senior patrol leader. I don't know. I haven't really prepped an answer for that.
Okay. We'll come back to you in a little bit. We have a new person that's joined us on the panel, Homer Boyd, who is the post advisor for a while. And Homer, why don't you fill us in about the period of time that you were the post advisor and how we somehow talked you into taking that position?
Keep it clean, Homer. Keep it clean.
Well, they told him that you didn't put on any makeup.
Oh, yeah. Excuse the glare, but that actually came as a result of my years as post advisor. I lost a hair for every incident that put stress on me.
Do you want to name names or
No?
Okay.
We'll leave them unnamed at this point. They know who they are. But in '84, I believe, the post was in need of transition to a new advisor. Dean Ramsey served long enough, in his mind anyway, 10 years. And I had been away through most of the 70s. I had been in the post in the late 60s and early 70s, and then had moved away to St. Louis for a while and came back in 79 and came back into the post, you know, kind of looking for old friends and stuff that I'd grown up with. And somehow I got talked into going to a canoe trip to Canada, and kind of got my linkage back a little more in that regard. And ultimately, when they decided Dean was wanting to retire, that they approached me. I'm not real sure why they approached me, but they did. And you know, after some, I mean, I was reluctant initially because I had not been real close up to that point. You know, I'd had some dealings with the post, but not fully, you know, jumped in with both feet at that point. And was a little apprehensive of doing that, but they managed to convince me, and so I became the advisor for an 8-year stint, and which overlapped these guys that were here and some others that you know, it was a good experience. I truly enjoyed it. Got me back into scouting and back into doing the things I really enjoyed doing.
Good. Were there any challenges during your advisorship?
There were always challenges. The initial, when I first took over as advisor, initially we had a couple of instances that involved some of the boys, and I think first instance is what kind of helped nudge Dean to resign, and then we had an excursion to a Ranger game that some of the boys after the game kind of got wild, and it resulted in me having to actually ask the post president to resign. He still was active in the post, but he did resign as president, and we changed a few of the rules and regulations to where we were going to behave more scout-like. And
I think that was when the Badass Advisor speech started, isn't that right?
well, that was the first ski trip that I was the advisor on, that I had to make sure that everyone clearly understood that we were scouts. This was a scout trip, and that anyone who didn't toe the line would be put on a bus and their parents called to pick them up at Greyhound Terminal.
That was part of the challenges of having teenage boys.
Yes, yeah,
you
teenage
in
boys
college.
and college age boys mainly was part of the problem, because at that time, you know, drinking age was 18, and the college age kids, you know, could obtain that, and they were an influence on some of the younger boys. So that was part of the challenge, was to get it back to where we were doing the things that we enjoyed doing, and we didn't need the extra stimulus to do that.
All right. Ben, Homer was still the advisor when you were in the post.
Correct.
And how was it that you were recruited into Post 52?
I believe it was at summer camp, and I remember a lot of the staffers were 52 members, and I remember them inviting me to the meetings, and kind of you know, it was a big happy moment for me to be able to come to the post meeting and see the post and the people that I'd seen it on staff at camp, and actually be a part of all that. And then shortly thereafter, I think I got involved in the ski trip and doing some of those activities. And, you know, over the years, I've built a lot of relationships that have lasted a lot further than just the experience with the post. And as Alan mentioned, you know, taught me a lot about life, the importance of those relationships, and just a lot about picking yourself back up, getting going again. And you know, I think the experience for me has done wonders for my life. It's basically made me who I am today, or the character I am today, however you want to put it. But
We can't.
Is
put
that good or
part on
bad?
tape.
yeah, exactly. But I have so many fond memories of the post. whether it be at the tree lot, chunking a piece of wood at each other, or flocking each other, whatever we were doing.
Ben got ran through the Vexor a number of times.
Yeah,
It's because you were pretty small.
yeah, I was pretty small. I could fit through the thing, but I remember the ski trips, having to warm the vehicles up in the middle of the night, try to keep them from freezing, and playing tag on the ski slopes. Just a lot of good times.
Well, good. Now, you went on one of the canoe trips, didn't you, with Post?
Yes, went up to Charles L. Summers, and I think I was 14 that year, so it's pretty tough on me. As you can tell, I'm not a real big guy. So when I was 14, I was even smaller, and that trip was a tough trip for me as far as physically, but I enjoyed it very much. So I usually got to carry everybody's PFDs in a bag and their paddles and all, but it was an experience of a lifetime.
Isn't that what this is from?
Yeah, I was carrying everybody's paddle, and I you only get basically one paddle when you're there. You don't carry a whole lot of spares. And I remember Matthias or a few guys had the special paddles they had brought, and so when I was carrying those, you were portaging a lot from lake over the land and back to the next lake. Well, those portage trails are really wet, slippery, and I slipped and fell, and as on my way down, I was sitting there thinking, well, do I brace myself with those paddles and risk, just quick thought, and I fell flat on my face and busted my nose. And I get back up and look at Matthias thinking he'll say something like, you look messed up, because it didn't feel good. And he just looks at me and goes, what are you doing? Get back. Get back on the trail. Keep going. So anyway, we get to lunch that day, and they finally stop for lunch, and they're all calling me Rudolph and things like that. Evidently that swelled up pretty good. But anyway, it was a good time.
I think Homer and Steve, did y'all go on that trip?
Yeah, we that was the trip. I think it was in '89, and it was in addition to the three of us, John Mathios and Monty Hobbs, Terry Johnson, Alan Johnson, and the guide. Isn't that right?
Right.
So yeah, it was a good trip. Yeah.
I think a whole category of discussion could be injuries and accidents. I've heard the one of the nose. I think during your term, Homer, were there any other injuries that you can think of?
Well, I mean, there were, fortunately, our post-ski trips, we did not have a serious accident while I was advisor. I do know that there were a couple of instances before I was advisor, one involving a buck game in the parking lot. We're waiting to go on the ski trip, and in which I guess it was a fractured collarbone or something.
Well, I think that was playing Frisbee, ultimate Frisbee.
Okay. Well, at any rate, I don't really recall too many injuries. I mean, there were minor cuts and abrasions and nicks and broken noses and other appendages lost, but for the most part, not a lot of injuries. I do want to tell one more story about that canoe trip, though.
Okay.
And this involves Steve, and it only works if someone else tells the story, because Steve doesn't remember quite the way I do. But Steve was my partner in the canoe, and all during the canoe trip, I'd portaged the canoe, and Steve took the pack and all. And
How come Steve didn't carry the canoe?
well, he didn't want to, I guess.
Yeah, well, now keep in mind also that the food pack at that point was probably as much, if not more, weight than the canoe.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Yeah. So
we were one man short. Somebody had a double portage, so
yeah.
everybody carried their weight for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So at any rate, I finally convinced Steve about fourth or fifth day in that he needed to portage at least once, the canoe. And we got to looking at the map, and it was only a little 3-4 rod portage, coming up. So I said, this is an opportune time for you to do it. He had been watching me all during the course of the portages, where I get in, mid calf in the water, get the canoe up, go up, tromp into the next lake up to about mid calf, flip the canoe, and then we'd load up and leave. So he gets the canoe up on, and I'm got the pack, and I'm watching him, make sure he's got everything okay. Unfortunately, this little portage turned out to be, about a 45, 50 degree slope.
Straight up.
So,
Might have been the same spot where Ben broke his nose.
So at any rate, he was not feeling too good when he came to this little pothole lake. And I got there first, and I walked out to the water's edge, and it was real springy, foaming. And apparently, all the stuff had grown well out into the lake. Well, before I could warn Steve, he comes tromping in, steps off the edge of this, and disappears below the water.
Homer made no effort to warn me whatsoever. I'll have to clarify that.
No, I just did not get the opportunity.
If he said anything, I was underwater at the time. So.
Yeah, he came up spewing and all the swamp gas, all the gas that
Exxon needs to go drill up there because it smelled pretty right.
Yeah, came up with him, and he was not real happy after that.
I had enough thought going on that I handed my camera to you, so that hopefully I saved some of the pictures, which I think I did.
Yeah, but
So, unfortunately, there wasn't one of that though.
But that is one of my fond memories of that canoe trip was watching Steve go under.
What? I went underwater. What can you say? What can you say?
Homer, if I could get you for the period of time that you were the advisor for Post 52 to kind of give a general description of, if I can get you to give kind of a general description of the period of time that you were advisor, just in terms of, the health of the Post, your general feeling of they were, getting things done or struggling, or just any kind of thought that you have that would be kind of a summary of that period of time.
Well, my view of that period of time was Post was at one of its peaks. The Post tends to cycle through as far as the number of kids, the strength, the activities, how independent they are in action and everything. And I think they were at that point on one of their highs. We actually took over 35 kids one time on a ski trip, which was a good indication that of the health of the Post. We did a lot of activities. We took a Philmont trip. We did Summers trip. We did ski trips every year. We had the Christmas tree lot. And the boy leadership in the Post was really excellent during that period of time. I could not have been more impressed with the caliber of the kids that we had doing that. My philosophy, which was the philosophy I learned coming up in the Post as a boy and an officer of the Post, was the advisor should be there but not really be visible. The unit should run with the boys, and they should be making the decisions and stuff. And the advisor basically steps in only if they kind of get out of the line of what our real intent was, and to provide the logistics and the things that they need to make sure that they function and operate. And they did a very good job, excellent job. Tree lots were mostly successful. There were a few that weren't, but especially the one year where we ordered late. We ordered the trees late and wound up with all 15-foot trees and in a 5-foot tree market. So we wound up having to saw off a bunch of them.
Down, I think.
Yeah. So, but again, it was a very healthy period of time for the Post, and a lot of good young leaders coming through, and most of those you'll see in these interviews of this time period.
Okay, I think we actually have a couple that have joined us now. We've got Mark McBride and his other brother, Tim McBride. And if I can, Mark, start with you and just have you kind of introduce yourself and cover the period of time that you were in the Post, and while at the same time kind of bring us up to date where you are today.
Okay. I joined the Post in the late summer of 1981. Went to summer camp with my troop 186 out of Arlington and met several Post members working on camp staff, which I think is going to be a reoccurring theme today. Ben Fortner earlier touched on this. Andy Wilcox and David Lang particularly. Terry Test was a merit badge instructor of mine that summer. And I really, at that point, in my troop, you sort of lived in a shell in terms of general scouting. You didn't know what scouting was beyond the confines of the church we met at and in our camp out. So I didn't even know about exploring or any of the other opportunities. But what I did know at the time was that I was just about done with scouting at the age of 13. I was not even an Eagle Scout yet, but I'd learned everything my troop had to teach me, and all of my peers had already dropped out by that point. So had it not been for Post 52, I'd have dropped out of scouting at a relatively young age and before I got my Eagle Scout. So I joined in 81 and within a couple of years was post president. And as Homer was alluding to, I kind of came in on the tail end of one of the highs of the post in terms of membership and activity, and I actually bridged one of those to another. And for a good chunk of the year and a half I was post president, I presided over a very small post of a handful of members, which was often disappointing, discouraging, depressing. But I had the joy and the pride and privilege of seeing the post bloom again, and seeing a lot of these guys that were just a year and 2 years and 3 years younger than me come into the post. And then, and I stuck around, all the way through my late teens and early 20s. Now I sell software and hardware to hotels and restaurants, and I continue working sort of on the periphery of the post as an alumni or alumnus. And I do some work with the Worth Ranch Committee, the Facilities Committee. So.
Okay. Well, I think you're right now that you talk about it, that the post was very strong in the late 80s and early 80s, and in about 83, that time frame, there was one of the dips. It was very low, and you were one of the ones that bridged it and helped build it back up to a very, very strong period in the mid 80s and later. So that was a difficult, lonely time, but built up pretty quick. Tim?
My name is Tim McBride, and I'm, of course, Mark's younger brother. And I think I got recruited because membership was low at the time, so they needed some extra bodies.
It's the only reason.
Well, you were part of the Arlington Wave.
Right. Part of the Arlington contingent that took over things and made it really happen in the late 80s. Yeah. No, I joined, I believe, around 1984, and one of the main reasons why I got recruited, obviously, is because of Mark's involvement. Wanted to be around, older brother and hang out, do the kind of things he was doing. Became post president sometime in that time period in the late 80s. Got active in the Order of the Arrow. Summer camp was real an attraction for me, and the different activities. Philmont, I went to Philmont with the post. I forget what year that was, with Homer and the groovy glasses that he brought to the Philmont trek. Currently, I'm back involved with the post as an associate advisor, trying to build things back up and give those guys the opportunities that I had. I just enjoyed my time in the post. That was my group of friends. That was my fraternity, so to speak, growing up as a high schooler and a college student. And so hopefully it can create that again for the younger guys that are involved now.
Well, good. I think the topic that may all of you be in common is tree lot. Which ones of y'all were chairman of the tree lot?
I think all of us were at one point, except for Homer, unless you were way back when.
I never was officially, but as a post president for one or two of them, I can't recall, you played a big role. And if you appointed the wrong person to be in charge of it, you wound up picking up a lot of slack.
Right.
And Tim and I did, our family, we didn't come from a family of means, so if we were going on ski trips and things like that, we were going to have to earn every dollar, and we did that largely through years of tree lots and shrimp trips and things like that. So.
Well, I don't know if Tim was a tree lot chairman. I know he was a ski trip chairman, in which he holds the record for the largest tip for a breakfast.
And how much was that tip?
7,000. Oh, it's grown.
No, let Tim tell it, because he's the money man, and he can tell that story.
That's okay. That year I was in charge either just of the ski trip or the money, and we stopped at some restaurant. This is the year we went to Wolf Creek or not?
No, we went to Crescent View.
So we stopped somewhere along the way to eat breakfast or lunch or something in between. and I was in charge of the money, had the money bag, and I specifically took it inside because I didn't want to leave it in the car or something might happen. We had our meal, and it was time to get back on the road, so we all piled in the cars and took off. And I think it was shortly after we took off, or it was a couple hours down the road. Maybe.
Far enough to run out of gas and have to buy gas again.
Yeah, we'd stopped for gas, and after going over one of the passes, and we were a good hour away from where we had breakfast, and Tim, we said, "Okay, Tim, go pay," and he started tearing the cars up, trying to figure out where the money was, and then it dawned on him that he might have left it.
I think it was in Trinidad.
Yeah.
I was young and impressionable, and she was a good-looking waitress, so I felt it was just right to tip her.
It was at the New Way Cafe, as I recall, in Trinidad. Now, didn't that bank bag basically traverse all of the Rocky Mountain part of the United States trying to find us for the next week?
And I don't think it ever did it?
Yeah,
The day we left.
The way in which that transpired, of course, we called back. They found the bag. They said that they would, instead of us going all the way back and picking it up, that they would just put it on the bus to Gunnison, from Trinidad to Gunnison. How difficult could that be? I mean,
Bag full of money.
well, it was
Traveler's
traveler's
checks,
checks.
It was about $2,500.
There was
not
cash.
$7,000.
I think it was 7,000.
So at any rate, fortunately at that time I had
Actually, Homer could tell us how much it was. He put the whole trip on his credit card.
Yeah, he's probably still got receipts.
I had a pretty elastic credit at that time.
I was just preparing Homer for later times when he needed to use his credit card to get the post by.
Air miles.
So at any rate, they put it on a bus, but it turns out at that time there were two bus services, Greyhound and Trailways, Continental Trailways. Well, Greyhound didn't serve Gunnison, and Continental Trailways didn't serve Trinidad. So they put it on the Greyhound, so it had to go to Pueblo and change hands in Pueblo to the other bus service, and then wound up at Gunnison. And we were there for five days or so, skiing. And every day we'd go by the bus terminal to see if the money was there. And the morning that we were leaving to drive back is when it showed up.
I think Tim was also in charge of some of the money at one of the tree lots where the following year after, when we were opening up the tree lot and got into opened it all up and everything, and someone went into the restroom and
I found that.
tucked
yeah.
away in one of the little hiding places was
It was in the toilet.
deposit from the year before.
Yeah.
That
It was one of the last deposits. Apparently it got deposited, but in the wrong place.
It was in safekeeping.
But it's amazing it stayed there an entire year. And of course, what we have to explain is that toilet had never been plumbed, so it just sat in this bathroom in this one of those ready-made office trailers, and never actually got used, except for in critical emergencies. I think once or twice over the years. But so that's why something like that could just sit down in the toilet bowl without actually ever being noticed for an entire year.
Needless to say, when it came time to plan the reunion, they didn't let me handle the money. That's what I'm in charge of.
Though, that wasn't the first time that we left money behind on a ski trip. There was a trip earlier when not only the money bag, but the money bag holder, Andy Wilcox, both got abandoned on the way home from a ski trip. And maybe in a little bit, if you get...
Well, I'd like to go ahead and talk about it now. During the time that I was in the post...
Well, I was going to suggest maybe you wait till Dean Ramsey and Kent Couch perhaps could be sitting here in front of us since they were both adults on that trip.
Was Wilcox being lost? That wasn't under your...
No, Ramsey was advisor.
Okay.
Couch was
Yeah.
actually the trip advisor because Ramsey was sick and then showed up 2 days later because he wasn't sick anymore.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
Jim Curry was on that trip as well. He
We'll
might be a
we'll
good-
save that because Ramsey, he lost 2 post presidents during his term.
Ramsey wasn't real good in that regard.
Yeah, so we'll
Retaining
cover that at a
his
different
leadership.
time.
Come on, Dean.
Come on, Dean.
You want to go ahead and get Jim down here with maybe in place of Homer?
Well, just while they're shifting people out, I wanted to talk just for a minute about the role of the Order of the Arrow in the Post
Sure.
in the mid-'80s. I think both Mark and Tim, y'all were lodge chiefs during that time period, and how did the OA and the Post interact during that time period?
Well, they were basically one and the same in the way I saw things. Most of the lodge officers, most of the lodge chiefs during that time were from Post 52. And so a lot of times at post meetings, we talked about OA events, and when we were on OA events, we talked about what we're going to be doing at the next post meetings or the next post activities. I think Mark and I share the distinct honor of being the only brothers to be lodge chiefs, but we were also involved in the post, so that was a high point for me.
You know, Tim's right. In all the years that I was active in the post, to me, there was no real. The lines between several different things were very fuzzy to me, and that was Post 52, Order of the Arrow leadership, summer camp staff, and probably to fewer of us, but to some degree, aquatic school. Either at least going and achieving, you know, anchorman status as an aquatic school student, and then some of us to even later on work on aquatic school staff. But I couldn't. Looking back on it, I can't conceive of having sacrificed any of those things, you know, because it all combined, I think, to make my experience well-rounded. So.
Did you have much of a life outside of those things?
No, I don't remember anything about my life besides scouting back then.
That's all he had. His mother wrapped him in swaddling clothes and brought him to the post.
That's
How
true.
old were you?
Well, I was 13. Well,
How old did you have to be?
14, and I turned 14 on a Wednesday night, and that was the night I gave you my my application to join. But I'd been coming to meetings for 2 months by then.
That's right.
So,
But your brother Ben, your mother did bring when he was
in spring of
a year
'82.
old.
No, he would have been 3 because it was the spring of '82. We had an open house.
Well, the real factor there is that she would bring Mark to the meetings and hold the baby in the car, waiting for him to take him home at the end of the meeting.
She'd go to the Dairy
Yeah,
Queen
she-
down on Bluebonnet
yeah,
Circle and
spend
read a
time after
book
doing that.
until time to come pick me up.
I wanted to comment about the OA thing.
Okay.
though. During that period when I guess I was still advisor at that point that you were talking about, I thought one of the challenges was differentiating the post and our loyalty and our love for it and the things we did from this utter dedication to the OA that created a situation where it wasn't always distinguishable. People would join the post and think this is the OA post, and to some extent it was, but I felt it was really important at that time, and I didn't succeed completely, but I think we spent a lot of time trying to indicate that, hey, we're Post 52 first, then we're summer camp staff, and then we're OA and all those things in addition.
I always knew that was a concern of yours, and a well-founded one, but I think the thing, if I could interpret the thing I was always concerned about, or that I thought you were concerned about, is that we would stop doing ski trips and other high adventure trips and things like that. And while we slowed down a bit, perhaps in the 80s, we still did, 2 summers trips and 1 Philmont trip in that decade, and we didn't miss a ski trip that whole decade. Now, the decade that followed, I don't think once went on a high adventure trip, and they missed a few ski trips, and a lot of that because they were maybe so focused on the Order of the Arrow.
To some extent, maybe living that image that's what we do.
Yeah.
You know, we do the OA. We did it well. It was a great part of our culture and our heritage.
I think culture is actually a good description of what we had going on in the post. People lived it, and it became, you learned how things were done, and you became part of it. We need to go ahead and have you introduce yourself,
Oh,
Dean.
sorry. Homer
and
was alluding to me and slandering my character, so I thought I had to come out here. I'm Dean Ramsey. I was a member, joined in '70. Alan Edmonds went through school with me through junior high and high school, and I always wondered where he spent his summers until he came back. He'd come back sunburned, from summer camp. So he brought me to camp and then to Post 52. Joined then became advisor in '74 when I started shaving. I was pretty dang young. Yeah. No, you went away to college. You were gone. Nobody was left. And Jack Boyd was still around. Terry Wilkes had been advisor for a couple of years in the early '70s, and then he kind of disappeared, and so I picked up the slack.
all right, we'll be talking more about your period of time. What are you currently doing?
I just retired from AT&T after 20 years, and I have worked for many years in the inmate telephone business. I put phones in prisons and jails. Some people don't like that, but there's a lot of money in it. Yeah. Put one in the post room.
All right, to your right is Jim Curry. If you'd introduce yourself and tell us your background.
I believe I joined the post in 1978. That was my first year of summer camp at Worth Ranch and my first aquatic school. And clearly, Scouting had a lot more than I'd imagined at that time, at that age. And being fresh off an aquatic school experience that people like Rob Moran or Terry Test were inviting me specifically to come to a post-52 function, a first nighter, I couldn't refuse and was just blown away with a group that would do so many high adventure activities that obviously had so much going on organizationally in the room, just the history in the room and the camaraderie. And to be invited, I was rather overwhelmed. And I think, Rob, you just used the word culture, and that was clear from the moment you set foot in the room, I felt. And I've really been blessed by my experience and my relationships and my fellowship because, frankly, in the business world, I've often been disappointed that the culture I found in so many other aspects of life just pale in comparison to what we really enjoyed as boys. So that was rather special.
Well, good. And what is it that you do currently?
I spent my career in advertising and marketing, and primarily with ad agencies. And at the moment, I'm an in-house marketing specialist with a pharmaceutical company.
Okay, good. Dean, the reason why we brought you in here was we were having a discussion regarding lost post-presidents. And I believe the most recent one, at least under your term, was Andy Wilcox. And if we're going to talk about Andy, I think it may be important to talk about where he is right now. If Mark, can you kind of tell us what you know on him?
After his time as post-president, Andy went off to school at Southwest Texas State and applied for officer candidate school in the Marine Corps, was turned down once or twice, so stubbornly just enlisted, went through boot camp, was only just as he completed boot camp and returned for his next semester of college, was finally notified of his acceptance to OCS. So went back through all of that program again, got his commission upon graduation from Southwest Texas State, and has been an officer in the Marine Corps for 16, 17 years, somewhere around there. Is currently a lieutenant colonel and is the ops officer for the 3rd Division, based out of Okinawa, where Shirley and the kids are. But since, after a brief stay of assisting with tsunami relief in, Southeast Asia area, he's been assigned since the 1st of April to Afghanistan, where he's an advisor to the Afghan National Army. And in fact, just this past week, we got an email from Andy indicating he'd been given a command post in, do you remember the name of the region?
QALAT, however you pronounce that.
Yeah, something like that. So overseeing.
It's right near the Pakistan border where all the activity is.
Right.
So he was a little nervous about it.
He's definitely in the heat of it.
His younger brother David was telling us last night at the ball game that Andy called him to ask him, should I do this or not? And David said, hell no, don't do that. It was a tough decision for Andy to go do that. But he's over there now, training Afghans.
This may be just as well an opportunity to tell one Andy story that I just love, and it's reminiscent of Tim on the ski trip, and that Andy was always a little younger than everybody else, always a little smaller than everybody else, but was not afraid to take charge or take responsibility. And so on one of his very first ski trips, he was the money man. And in those days, we had CB radios. We thought we were very sophisticated and high-tech, so we could talk to each other's car. And, of course, one of the very first gas stops we made in Colorado or New Mexico. Springer. Andy jumps out of the car to pay for the gas, right on top of it, very much in charge, efficiently pays for the gas, efficiently gets a receipt, and efficiently notices that we've all pulled out of the parking lot without him. And he has no cell phone, no way to contact us other than a CB. And it's, of course, another hour or two down the road before any of us bother to take a head count or realize we're one man short, the leader. And Andy's only consolation
is to pay for gas again and realize.
Well, as post-tradition would have it, you don't notice you're missing it until you stop for gas again. But Andy, of course, was not too happy that we didn't notice he was missing. So my guess as a lieutenant colonel, he probably remembers to take a head count every chance that he gets.
I believe we were at the Clovis Air Force Base that night before we discovered that he was missing and the money was missing. And I believe Jack Boyd was with us on that trip, too.
But Andy was not helpless in the situation. He
had the money.
So he checked into a motel room.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But we drove back that night, bless him. It was hours to get back to Springer from Clovis. We drove back to get him there.
Speaking of CB radios, here's the Panther City Panther.
But now, as I recall the story, we had CBs in every vehicle but one. And there might have been one, and it just didn't work. So I think what had happened was everybody in the other vehicles that were communicating assumed Andy was in the van where I was, along with 7 or 8 or 9 other people. And we assumed he was in any one of the other vehicles other than the van. And so, the communication didn't get completed until we stopped for gas 3 hours later. Dean pokes his head in the van and says, "Hey, Andy, come on, it's time to pay for the gas." And I poked my head up from the magazine I think I had my nose buried in and said, "He's not in here." So I think it was at that point you guys, the adults, huddled, and Dean took a couple of them in a station wagon back, and Kent took the rest of us on to Clovis.
It was just so darn typical. It was something like that always happened on those trips.
Well, let's talk about another post-trip where you lost
You
a
were
scout.
on. You could tell about that.
This one would be in. No, I don't think so.
Yes, it would be a recruiting.
But the Post took a spring break trip, and this one was to Acapulco, and this is really the first time we'd done it. Dean was always kind of encouraging us to, think out of the box and do different things, and we came up with going to Mexico City and Acapulco by train.
Well, it was one of the early years that you were in the Post. We'd had a real low period. What would this have been, around 75, somewhere around 74. Real low period in the Post when we had to actually go out and recruit people, and we'd gotten you and Terry Test, a few others, to come into the Post. And you had a planning event. You had it down at Lewis Page's Lake House
Right.
at Great Granbury in the snow, and it was a seminal event for that period, that decade, because you decided, amazingly, you wanted to have 4, what do we call them, super activities in 1 year. Well, I don't think we'd ever done that, and hardly anybody ever did. It'd be good to do 1 super activity a year. So help me remember what they were. We did something in the spring. That was Mexico.
Yeah.
We did Charles L.
I
Summers.
think we did Summers.
And we did the OA National
Conference.
and then we did a ski trip. So
Right.
we achieved those 4 things. And the first one was Mexico.
Yeah,
Oh, we
that
did
was
sell
when
shrimp.
first time we sold shrimp was that
to
time
to
period.
help kids raise money to go. So we took a trip to Mexico by train. We went to Laredo and took the train from Nuevo Laredo, and it's $52 per person on this trip, believe it or not. That's what it cost for a week in Mexico. Decided to go to Acapulco the last night, but in order to do it, we had to ride the bus all night long, $6 round trip to Acapulco. Came back, got back in, 2 in the morning or something. We had an 8:30 train to get back to the United States. We overslept. Got to the train, but I was the only one on the back. And the guys, all these scouts come along with their bags and stuff. They just couldn't get there in time. So we had to take 2 taxis to get to the next town, just like in the cartoons where you've got
I think it was
train
because
going down one road and a taxi going down another.
your alarm didn't go off.
Well, yeah, you're right.
That's why we
what
were
it was.
running late for the train.
Yeah, and I was just barely an adult, as I remember during those days.
We,
So we missed the train and had to catch it at the next town.
Yeah, I remember. It was just everybody put your stuff up, get in, and we just piled in and ran to the train station, and we made it up the steps and into the train station to see the train pulling out. And of course, we're in Mexico. We're not in the United States. And you're right. We got in taxis, and 2 taxis, and
Very
we were
expensive taxis.
in the countryside chasing this train. We'd see it off in the distance. We'd think we'd getting closer, and we'd cross the train track and go on. And we just, finally, we got far enough ahead that we got to the train station, and we had a couple minutes before the train got there. And we're like, okay,
We were
we've
signed
made it.
early.
We have done it. And we had divided up. We were real smart and intelligent about this. We had, half of us had first class tickets where we could play cards and sit. The other half kind of had the sleeper car where we could sleep and because it was like a 24-hour train ride.
There were 8 of us, and we had
Yeah.
4
And
seats
the idea
in
was
first
we
class
would
and 4 in
would
Pullman.
switch back and forth during the trip. Well, so half of us waited where the seats were, and the other half for the sleeper cars in this small little town in Mexico. And the train pulls in, and I was in the group that I think were in the seats, and we got on, and we sat down, start playing cards and so forth. And then all of a sudden we hear something, and we look back, and I think it was David Sloan's running down the train. He's got this luggage, and he's running after the train, and finally we see him, he just kind of throws the luggage down and jumps into the train. Well, it turned out they kept the back part of the train locked. And so our boys are sitting there going, hey, the door's locked, and they're
So
you know,
peasants couldn't get on and sell you
Right.
little food items.
So I'm sure they were, in their best English was trying to tell somebody, could someone come unlock the door? We're supposed to get on here, and then the train starts taking off.
That was Herschel Allison, and David Sloan was the president of the Post, had the money, by the way, and he was there on the back. And then two guys, Chris Cordry and we remembered his
And
name last
somebody
night,
else.
Calkins, James Calkins.
Okay.
And two of those guys were Mensa members, just brilliant, but eggheads. And they just sat there and watched the train pull out of the station while they couldn't get on.
Well, I remember Sloan just kind of almost crawling down the aisle, going, "We missed,"
saying, Ramsey, we left them, and out of breath and red in the face. And so I jumped up and grabbed the porter and said, "You've got to go back." And he looked at me like I was an idiot. "We don't turn this train around," he said in rough Spanish, or rough English. I tried the rough Spanish. And so I said, "Well, can you radio back and tell them to jump in the same taxis and go to the next town?" We had to catch up with them. It was a foolish idea, but we radioed back and left message with the train station manager to have those Boy Scouts grab those same taxis, and we'd pick up in the next town. So the next 3 towns we went to, we were all hanging out the windows looking for somebody in a scout uniform. And by the third town we got to, it was apparent that somebody was going to have to get off the train. I believe you were the oldest one. What were you?
Probably
18, 19 years
18,
old.
19.
So I said, "All right, you're the advisor now. Take these boys to Nuevo Laredo. And when you get off that train, don't stop until you're in the United States side of the border, and don't dare come back across. You go straight to the Boy Scout office and camp out in their lawn until I get there, probably tomorrow." And so what did
Well, I
you
remember
find when you got to Laredo?
Well, I remember you had your little travel bag or something, a small little bag. We started stuffing biscuits in there, rolls, so that you could get off. And we were truly in the middle of nowhere in Mexico. And the 3 that were left on the train, none of us spoke Spanish, but we had to go. You spoke a little bit, but the 3 that we left behind, I don't think they spoke Spanish either. So they were in the middle of nowhere, didn't know.
And
so
didn't have a dime. Well, I think they had between them maybe 40, 50 cents. It turns out, long story short, I got off and spent that entire day backtracking, walking, and taking taxis and buses through each of those towns because we didn't know how far they got in the taxis, assuming they had been on taxis to begin with. Turns out they never got on the taxis. So after I got back to the last little town, I took a train back to the city, Mexico City, to find them, not having any clue where to start, figuring at the police station. And you don't really want to get involved with the police down there. They're not always your friends. The word was, when we got back to Querétaro, where we left them on the platform, the train manager said, "Boy Scouts? No Boy Scouts." I said, "Wait a minute. They were standing here. You had to know it." He said, "Oh, those." We had some. The police took up a collection, he said. And he said police, and we just got all excited. Took up a collection and bought them bus tickets to get them back to Mexico City. So we went back to the church there in Mexico City, which is on Embassy Road. It's a really nice place, where Steve Fairchild and his father was the minister, let us say there. And there they were. So we were able to get reconnected and take flights back to Nuevo Laredo the next day for a lot of money. Meanwhile, the scout office had found out that this rogue advisor had lost 3 scouts in Mexico, and I think Terry Test or somebody had called, and he was on the trip too. Mm-hmm. And every station along the border was posted with names like Terry Test and David Sloan and trying to find these guys. So
well, I just remember I was part of the group in Laredo waiting for y'all to make it back, and y'all finally arrived, and we were traveling in a couple of vehicles, I guess, and we went across the border, and we stopped, I think it was at a Holiday Inn, and the reason why we stopped, and it was probably involving David Muller, was that, okay, everybody is here. We're finally all back together after this cross-country trek by Dean and so forth, and we called Muller and said, okay, call everybody. We have everybody together. I mean, it was just, hurrah, we're finally all together. So we all load up in the vehicles, and we head on up, and I guess we got to Austin.
Stopped at a McDonald's.
Yeah,
to get hamburgers.
And then I think for gas also, and we went to get David Sloan, who's the post president at the time.
In fact, he stepped into a phone booth to call home and tell everybody we were okay. He said, "Don't go off and leave me. I'll be right there."
Right. Well, I think he told me he was going to change his contacts or
No,
something.
something like that.
But anyway, we stopped and in Austin was finding David to get the money because he had the money, and that's when we had that sinking feeling that we didn't have David Sloan with us anymore. Apparently, we had left him at the
Yeah.
hotel when he was calling to tell.
That was the time we got
everybody
into the
together.
back of the van. I think it was your van, wasn't it? There was a bunch of people sleeping back there to try to pay for the gas, and found out that Sloan was not asleep back there.
And apparently, Dean had had enough of this cross-country tracking to pick up stray scouts that he told David to take a bus.
Well, we told him we were going to come get him. So we turned around and we said, "This is crazy. We're going to Fort Worth." So we called him back and said, "No, go get a bus ticket." He was kind of ticked off.
Well, he had the money.
I was going to say, he had the money.
We left him twice by then. That's right.
All right,
had a
well,
long bus
we've
ride.
had a couple of two people join us now. Let me have them introduce themselves again, kind of give a background on your involvement with the Post and what you're doing today. Ken?
Yeah. My name's Kent Couch, and I joined the Post after being on a summer camp and being involved in the Order of the Arrow. Eddie Seelheimer and I had tended together my first year at camp in 1969, and we had teamed up together as the loyal opposition, me being from East Fort Worth and Eddie from West Fort Worth and from all areas away from the Post, and had finally managed to beat the Post 52 machine in an election when Eddie was elected chief and I was elected a first vice chief. And the first thing we did after being elected, having beaten the big machine, was to go over on a Wednesday night and join the Post, because there was no doubt in our minds that after we accomplished what we set out to accomplish, we wanted to be a part of the most active unit in the council. So that was an exciting time, and we were welcomed with open arms and very ready to get on with our lives in Post 52. At this time, I own a franchise in the child identification business. Just recently, having left a 20-year career in the printing industry and a career prior to that as an elementary school teacher and school principal.
Okay, thank you. Dee, I think we need to take a break, and we'll get to you when we come back.
Okay.